Today, I'm joined by Anne Griffiths, who is a West Coast painter, and she's here to speak to us today about her recent exhibition, Mapping Nature, which will be on display at our 1384 Dufferin Street location from March 5th until the 30th. So with that said, thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Excellent, yeah. I was wondering if you could start us off by talking to us a bit about mapping nature and why it's so important to you.
Well, I'm a big lover of nature, and I've grown up in the Wild West. So in my whole life, I've been very integrated into the woods through a very adventurous mother who was an outdoor enthusiast. So I grew up going to beaches and climbing mountains and skiing down mountains and spending lots of times in the forest as a child, just playing in the woods. So it's been part of my life always. So.
That's exciting. And from that sort of childhood and those early beginnings, you sort of talk about that in your artist statement, sort of these stories that you'd create and these little maps that you would make, and sort of saying that they've kind of found their way into your work, both, you know, in your career before an artist as a graphic designer and then as an artist. What sort of like keeps you coming back to these maps?
I think it's a subconscious thing. I find in nature, I gravitate to the really intimate spaces within a landscape. I appreciate a greater landscape, for sure, and the environment that I'm in, but I get very connected to the more intimate spaces within a landscape, and I love to sort of climb into the dark, sort of encompassing, like closing spaces where I can just sit with the woods and listen to the birds and the trees moving. And I find that once you sit down and slow down, there's so many beautiful spaces within the woods or at the edge of a beach. And I definitely focus on the intricate connections between plant life and flora and fauna, how the birds integrate with the trees and find their way through various threads within the landscape.
Yeah, because it's interesting, you know, sort of looking at the pieces around us, how you're creating like a larger sort of scene, but within those scenes, again, talking about those like that interconnectedness and those intimate spaces, you're creating that through the mark making. And especially in these, you refer to these as drawings. And it is interesting to see how those kind of lines will sort of meander throughout the space. You know, I can imagine sort of branches in the forefront kind of obstructing your vision, but also sort of playing into the organic lines. It's really, it is really interesting because it's kind of like a play between representational and abstract. Is that sort of intentional in the work?
It is, and I think I've always really admired nature in that there's so many beautiful lines and forms within those spaces. And I've always, as a designer, gravitated towards the negative space between two things to create a new image.
Right.
So I think with my work with nature in painting, I also try to find those little connections and create those spaces that create little beautiful shapes and icons within the painting.
Yeah. And sort of speaking about your background as, you know, in graphic design, does that sort of play into your color sensibilities? Because you're not necessarily working with, strictly speaking, like conventional landscape palettes, sort of working with more limited palettes, tertiary colors, different color combinations. Maybe you could speak to that a little.
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to go to the IDEA program in Kaplan University a long time ago. And we had color theory as part of the program for 4 years.
Right.
And it was twice a week intensive
Twice a
study.
week?
We did thousands of color chips with gouache, painting tertiary, primary colors, and all the combinations in between. And so I think 4 years of doing that twice a week and all the hours of homework to create the little books we had to make, all the color wheels and things. It gave me a really good sense of color and how to play with color.
Yeah.
And so I had that foundation right from the start.
Yeah.
So through design, color was always my driving force with my design. And that just carried on all the way through my career.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think it's when people are working with representational forms, they tend to default to, well, portraying it as it seems and as it looks.
Right.
And I think having that kind of background in color really frees you up to work with line and form and shape, and then sort of kind of as like a secondary maybe, and then also think about, okay, well, how can I incorporate different color palettes? Do you still, when you're starting to make a piece, do you have like those color swatches? Do you create like little sort of studies that maybe give you some sort of idea of what you're going to do, or how does that sort of take shape?
I typically start with color for any painting. I either have a feeling of a color combo I want to play with, and that will start my day, or I go to the studio and I start mixing a color. And once I've come up with a color that I want to work with, that will either become the foundation of the painting, or I'll start drawing with a brush with that color.
So you start with one color.
One color.
Oh, okay.
Or I may start playing with a palette
Yeah.
of a couple colors that I'll make. I never start with colors from the tube.
Yeah.
So I'll play around until I get an interesting combination, and then I start working on the painting.
And that one color, is that sort of guided by maybe like a thought or a feeling in that moment you're having, or is it sort of in mind with what you're going to be maybe working on?
It differs from day to day. Sometimes I'll see something on a walk or on my drive into the studio that will trigger something in me. A combination of, someone's house color to how a tree is sitting against it.
Yeah.
That'll be enough to inspire me to go play and try and create that combination for myself.
Yeah, that sounds like a really nice way to find inspiration in the everyday. With the work, you're not working from like images you've taken, or are you working strictly from memory, strictly from feeling, thought, emotion? Because I think that's one of the things when people sort of look and they see landscape, they're like, okay, well, what are they working from? And I think that's always an interesting point of reference for viewers, because I think it allows them to connect with the work in a different way.
Right. Well, when I first started painting, I was working from reference. And I found that it became too much like my art direction career, where each painting became a project.
Yeah.
And then I had a mental block on that, that it was so much like work. And I have the ability to represent things very realistically. So I would get caught up too much into the composition and the perfection of the painting. And I just never liked the work. I was never happy with the work. So I decided to ban that process from my life and just started painting intuitively. And so what I like to do is go out into the woods or down by the beach, just take in the environment and try to sit with it and draw whatever inspiration I can from a place.
Okay.
And then I may not go right away to paint that situation. It might come months down the road. I'll recall being at the beach at a certain place and seeing a certain palette of colors play in the water, and then that will suddenly inspire me one day. And so it's all done. It all comes back to me through memory, and also sometimes the canvas I'll see shapes in the gesso that I've created.
Yeah.
And there's enough form and like a hint of a landscape that I'll then follow with color and determine a painting from that.
No, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool how, it sounds very liberating to have taken something that you built a career on, in terms of working very sort of literally with a structure and a set sort of goal in mind.
Yeah.
And creating art has much that same sort of structure, but the way in which you can go about it is, really up to the person who's creating it. So it sounds like a really interesting moment in time for you to have said, okay, I have to do away with that.
Yeah.
I have to fully sort of exercise that from my creative being to move forward in this kind of direction. And I guess, like, speaking of that, what was, because you developed a career before moving into this career as a painter, what was the sort of, was it like a moment in time that, you're like, oh, this is what I have to be doing instead? Or how did that sort of come about?
I always wanted to be a painter.
Yeah.
I unfortunately went through art school, Emily Carr, in the 80s. When painting was dead, they decided they weren't going to have painting in art school anymore.
It's a pretty big proclamation.
It was a bit of a shock because I was already in the program and had a plan. And
painting is dead.
Yes. And then I was told after first year that they were cutting the program. So
Entirely?
Wow. Yeah. Drawing, painting. I asked if I could do independent study to carry on. But they were shifting the school. At that point, they decided that media arts and digital and photography were going to be the focus of Emily Carr at that time. And they were integrating design into the school, which they were offering me that opportunity to go into the design program. But at that point, I didn't want to be a designer. So
you didn't want to be one at all?
Not at all.
Oh.
So it was not on my agenda. So it's ironic I ended up there. But and so I didn't really have much choice other than to leave Emily Carr because I wasn't inspired to go into any of those programs. So I left with the idea that I would become an illustrator. Like I would go shift my focus, go to design school. It was a design illustration program, and I would focus on illustration as my study. So, and it was a really tough program to get in. I got in the first year, and you're with the same core group of people for the whole time.
The whole time?
There's 20 people, and you go through the whole program together.
And it's a 4-year program?
Yeah.
Wow.
And everybody ends up doing something different. And as I went through the program, my illustration skills were growing, and definitely that was still my driving force. But as you have to take all of the design as well as the other classes, so my design skills were naturally there, and I kept getting awards and accolades for my design, and I had no desire to do it, but I had to do it as part of the program. And so that kind of took over my life. And I was hired out of grad school to be an art director at an ad agency on my first day out of class. So I then was in an art director position. I had no idea how to do that in an advertising agency that was moving really quickly. And that became my career.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, you clearly had the know-how and the ability to do that. It's not just something that, you end up doing.
Right.
Obviously, you have to have the acumen and be able to display proficiency. And, when you are working in, I have limited experience with design in a professional capacity, only because it relates to what we do here.
Right.
But I've, talking to people in that industry, it's incredibly demanding. And there's a high level of precision and perfectionism, and you're working directly with or for a client, and so when there's potentially a lot of money on the table, you really do have to have your best foot forward or both feet forward at all times. So even though it sounded like it wasn't what you were wanting to do or maybe drawn to do, there was something that was unconsciously leading you in that direction.
That's right. And I think it was a creative career. So for me, I was still able to create every day.
Yeah.
Whether it was logos or books or brochures or art directing a photo shoot. I was always being able to be creative every day and do original things.
Yeah.
So
I think it's interesting because it does come into everything you're doing now. It's like you spent all of those years honing all of those skills, not necessarily directly. You weren't. Actually, that's a great question. Were you still painting and creating on the side?
Yes.
And doing illustration that's kind of in this vein, sort of fueling that fire, that painter within you?
I was the whole time. I always gravitated to projects, or clients came to me because I had those skills.
Oh, okay.
And so I ended up, even at the ad agencies, I'd get resort real estate development or things like Four Seasons and Raffles, because I could create magic worlds that other designers maybe didn't have those imaginations for.
Right.
So I was often sent to all of these exotic places where they were building projects, but at that point had nothing to show.
Yeah.
So I had to magically make something out of nothing and make it look like what it was going to be in the future. So
that's pretty cool.
I was able to luckily travel a lot and get to go to different climates to see different natural environments and draw from that for my painting career, which was great.
And acting as inspiration for that sort of, memory bank that you've spent all of those years developing, just allowing it to come through in a lot of different ways. And because looking at your work, it is definitely West Coast influenced, but there's also certain elements of it where it feels like more like maybe like a rainforest. I mean, I know they have, rainforests or more temperate climates in BC, but it feels like it's sort of oscillating between your lived experience and then also something beyond that.
Yeah, I think, a lot of my projects were in the tropics, so I definitely have a little bit of that in me that I want to translate through these West Coast, Pacific Northwest environments.
Yeah.
And especially in Victoria, there are a lot of palm trees in Victoria. It's a very...
Surprisingly.
Yeah, it's a very interesting, like, semi-tropical feeling area in some parts. So
no, that's the cool thing about BC is that you drive a few hours north or south and you're already seeing something very different. Mm-hmm. The biomes are just so vast.
They really are. Yeah.
And you can really understand how inspirational it can be for artists that work with landscape, because you really have almost everything at your fingertips. Mm-hmm. I mean, people maybe could say the same about Ontario, but we have trees and a lot of trees, and then you get the Canadian Shield.
Right.
But with BC, you sort of it goes from mountains to maybe tundra to plains to kind
Deserts.
of almost exactly, like almost rainforests, tropical sort of. Yeah, it's really, having spent a bit of time out there, I can see how inspirational it is.
It really is. And I think for me too, the light, moving to Victoria 10 years ago, I grew up in Vancouver, so the light there is very yellowy green, and because there's so many, not deciduous trees, evergreen trees, all the big dark cedars. It's very like Emily Carr paintings. It's very dark and dark green, and the light that casts off those is very affected by that.
Yeah.
So painting there I found a little bit challenging for my work because it's also very gray. So the light's very flat always. And we get, Vancouver gets a lot of rain. So moving to Victoria was like going to the south of France. The light.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it really is different. And our weather's way nicer.
Yeah.
We get about a third the rain of Vancouver. And even if it does rain during the day, it's always very brief, like an hour or so.
Yeah.
And then it's sunny again. So, and I think because we're right on the Pacific Ocean, we aren't buffered by the island. Mm-hmm. We have that mist in the air. It's very humid air. Mm-hmm. So the colors, we get lots of pinks and mauves and things in the light, or really golden light, beautiful golden light cast. And so I think for me, the changing light in Victoria was a game changer for my work. Just having that shifting color always around me. So.
Well, I mean, it does emphasize how important location is. And, Victoria is not too far from Vancouver. And it's just a small distance, but it can make the biggest difference in how you're looking at the landscape, and not literally the same landscape, but a lot of similar landscapes. Mm-hmm. And you sort of come at it from a completely different angle, being like, oh wow, I never really noticed those shades of teal, and because of how, like you're saying, if it's overcast, everything's muted, you're not getting a lot of contrast, things tend to look a bit more gray. The vibrancy isn't coming out in the same way. Where, if you are sort of in an area where those are kind of pushed to extremes, you begin to see those extremes, and then that tends to come through in the work.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think it's a good point to ask you a few thought-provoking questions.
Okay.
And I guess what I would like to ask first is, what's your favorite tool in the studio?
Favorite tool?
Or two. You can say two if one's too hard.
My favorite tool, I think I have this really big, flat, wide brush that I love to work with because it allows me to be really free. And I can paint very calligraphically, but it is so non-restrictive that I think it forces me to be more expressive and play.
Yeah.
So.
And speaking of tools, the one thing I wanted to ask was, so you've worked, in these drawings, you work with a lot of oil stick. Is that kind of reconnecting with that illustrative background?
I think what it came from, I always sketch when I'm in the car sitting on the ferry.
Yeah.
I always sketch in color. For some reason, I don't like to sketch black and white.
Oh, okay.
So because color is so important in my work, I love to just doodle in color. And so I have thousands and thousands of little doodles that are little compositions that are just color play. And I've been doing those for years. And it wasn't until I started playing with oil sticks that I realized, once I started working with them, that there were translations from those little sketches that I had done a long time ago. But it was there, this sort of drawing and color blocking was there like right from the start.
Okay, good. I'm glad I asked that. And when you do these sketches, is it pencil crayon?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I think knowing a couple of artists who do that, I'm always, as somebody who, I went to school for fine art as well, and I've always, whenever I sketch, it's always with graphite or pen. And so when I see people use things like crayons or color pencils sketching, I'm always like, I can see how liberating that is, because you're able to sort of constantly change tact within the work, even something as a simple sketch, and you can really sort of free yourself up to work maybe a bit more free form as well.
And I think that's the thing I realized when I look back on some of those earlier sketches. The subconscious, just the compositions and the playing with color was really freeing, and I wanted to find a way to get that onto the canvas, to go through that same process and have it be really organic and intuitive, and just have each piece end up being its own thing, its own life in a little world. And that was a way for me to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and the tactility is also lovely. I think oil sticks lend such a beautiful warmth and richness. Just how, because you're also working on linen, so that kind of mid-tone comes through, which then kind of, creates contrast with higher and darker values. And then also, because of the tooth, you get these really different sort of plays on texture.
And that's what I loved about the oil sticks, because it felt like paper, which I love working on paper.
Yeah.
So that was the closest way I could get that feeling on canvas.
No, that's cool. I'm glad I asked. It was going to slip by, but yes. What was what is or was the best piece of criticism you ever received?
Oh, I think that's an easy one. I did a 1-week residency with Harold Klender.
Oh, okay.
And he was so much fun. And we all had questions for him, and he would rotate from studio to studio, giving us an hour of his time each day.
Oh, nice.
And I came with a lot of my sketches to the studio to try to start to do new work. And so he would sit through them and raffle through them. And I was always asking him questions about, career advice and things moving forward, or try to get him to give me advice on my work. And he wouldn't. He just refused to give advice. But one thing he did say, which really stuck with me, is because one of the questions I had from him that I kept asking him and he wouldn't answer. It's like, how do you find your style?
Ah.
Because I felt like, because I could paint any kind of way, because I've been taught all the basic, skills to do that, I was kind of stuck in that I could literally kind of paint any kind of style I wanted to paint. I didn't feel like I had my own authentic voice.
Yeah.
And so I was really struggling with that. And that's why I did this residency. I wanted to really find my way to my own voice in my work.
Yeah.
And he just looked at me kind of annoyed because I'd asked a few times. And he finally said, "It will find you when you're doing the work."
That is a good piece of
Yes,
advice.
and it really stuck.
Yeah.
And it's really true. It's
Yeah.
like that 10,000 hour thing. You have to put in the time to get your true hand and your real voice to come through the work.
Yeah, I mean, your successes are often defined by the failures you have and what you take from them. And it's really, like to your point, putting in the time. It just doesn't, it is interesting because it's, when people look at it, they have the added benefit of observing from the perspective of seeing the finished result. Mm-hmm. They don't see all the countless hours that went into everything that they are not seeing. And that, I think, is one of the understated aspects of making art, is the sheer determination and willpower.
Yes, for sure.
To put the time in and sort of push through, even though you feel like you're just hitting your head against the wall, not sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, what am I doing? Like, what am I trying to do? And I think asking yourself that question honestly is really important as well, because it helps you to sort of find things within the work that, even though you might hate what you've made, there's one element of it you're like, I really like that, and sort of like pulling on that and seeing what's exposed.
Yeah, and from one painting to another, you don't know what you're going to discover in the next piece.
Yeah.
And that could be the piece that leads you to the next great thing you do. So, and I think also time with Harold, like he said, he's had this incredibly long career and he's done so many paintings. Sometimes he works 13 years on one painting. But he said, every painting teaches him something.
Yeah.
And it's so true. You have to just, stick with work, because you don't know what you're going to come up with. So many artists give up because they feel like they're putting all the time in but aren't getting anywhere. But you just never know when that tipping point's going to come.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
it is one of the things that it's hard to teach. You really have to have that passion.
Yes, for sure.
To push yourself through those difficult times. And I feel that also it's important to ask yourself, the why. I think the why is important. Why are you doing and choosing to do what you are choosing to do? It's a choice. Mm-hmm. And I think if you maybe try to understand more about the why and how you connect to the work on a emotional and physical or sort of intellectual level, that can also help to be a driving force to say, okay, yeah, I'm not really enjoying this right now, but at least there's a kernel of something in there that is acting as that sort of like that inspiration. Yeah. I think a good last question to ask would be, if you could have a conversation with any artist, living or dead, who would it be, and what would you like to talk to them about?
That's a tough one to choose, person. I think Per Kirkeby. He is dead, unfortunately.
But if you were with us, what would you?
What would I ask him? More than ask him, I'd like to sit with him while he's working.
Yeah.
And observing, because I think I connect with his work because he had a previous life to being a painter as well. He was a geologist, and so he was an observer of the landscape and geological forms, and he studied in Iceland and the Nordic regions. Mm-hmm. And He's a great Danish painter, if you don't know of him. But he was so passionate about nature and all the forms and motifs that exist within the faces of stone, and how trees are formed and roots connect, and I think I really relate to how he viewed the world.
I was going to say.
And the layers of things, and his graphic compositions of spaces. And he also tended to go into more intimate connections with an environment.
Yeah.
So I really definitely connect with his work. So I'd love to sit and just, he didn't speak English, but I would love to have observed his work and his process. And,
yeah.
And
you might not share the same spoken language, but you share a mutual language in terms of expressing thoughts and emotions onto a canvas. And it sounds like he's a kind of a kindred spirit, having had a previous career and sort of finding that within the work that he creates. And that's fascinating. I'll definitely have to look more into his work.
Yeah, he had a definite passion for color as well, which really inspires me, because I remember in one of his interviews, it translated in English, he said to his wife, she came in one day and she said, "Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful, pear, stop painting." And as soon as she left, of course, he had to go completely destroy it, because he didn't want to make a pretty painting.
Yeah.
He really wanted to make a powerful painting.
Yeah.
And it broke his heart that it was beautiful. So he went back and
feverishly is like,
yeah.
I have to destroy this.
Yeah, but he had this he had such a drive to do his thing.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to have anyone direct his work in any way, and he really wanted to make serious, authentic work that would have impact. So
fiercely independent.
Yeah,
and I think that's wanting to make it for yourself, not for anybody else specifically, and sort of allowing it to come through in the most authentic form. No, I think those
are good lessons.
Yeah, some really good lessons.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point to finish on.
Great.
So thank you today for joining me.
Thank you.
Really nice to connect with you and to hear you speak about your practice, the body of work, and I think give some really good insights into what people are seeing and how they should experience it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.
Great.
And that again was Anne Griffiths was joining me today to talk about her exhibition Mapping Nature, which again will be on display at our 1384 Dufferin Street location from March 5th to 30th.